Thanks everybody for joining us here today. Welcome to our members, our guests. Incredibly, it's been 3 years since we've last had a networking event such as this, and I think we've aptly called it Reconnecting Business because it has been such a long time, and it's an opportune moment for everybody to get back together again, see some faces we haven't seen in a long time, and get the chamber in and moving forward. I just want a few quick thank yous. Thank you again to our two keynote speakers, His Excellency Rade Stefanovic. Thanks for joining us. I know he'll have some good points and give us a great update. I'd like to thank Nenad Petrovic, who has flown up from Melbourne. Nenad is a demographer and will give us some really good insights on the Australian community, the Serbian Australian community. And I'd also like to extend a big thank you to Jasmine Romic from Quiddity, as well as Dalibor Ivkovic from Sales Trekker, who are our sponsors of tonight's event, and both will give us an update of their kind of businesses. And last but not least, a huge thank you to Luka Catering for, of course, organising the food and drinks. So thank you, welcome once again. And I will hand you over to my good colleague, one of my closest friends, Mr. Stevan Šipka, Vice President of the Chamber. Go for it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Oliver. Thank you all for coming. It is, as we know, it's been a while, and it's just great to get us all back together. I often get asked this question, who and what is the Australian Serbian Commerce Chamber? And we're obviously a chamber that was incorporated in Victoria. Our good friends in Melbourne set the chamber up back in 2017. We are a non-for-profit organisation incorporated in Melbourne, and we have representatives across the country. Obviously the main representation is in Melbourne and Sydney, of course. Our vision is to deepen the trade ties and business ties between Serbia and Australia, country which is dear to most of us in this room. And we always look at these types of relevant networking opportunities and continuing to leverage the fact that, you know, we do have connections between the two countries. We try to deliver our vision through our stakeholder engagement, and we get involved in activities to try and assist the members of the chamber. So I often talk about that the chamber can help all the businesses. We are much stronger united, and the chamber gives our community legitimacy, and that's something that's very important. And it's very important by the fact that we have so many distinguished people within this chamber, and you know, very high performing business people as well. And we can help be a voice. So we can help to be a voice either way between the two countries. We have great support from the diplomatic corps, both with His Excellency coming here today, so thank you. But we also have great support from the Australian ambassador in Belgrade. So it's really a two-pronged approach, and we have a chapter in Belgrade as well who do a great job. Our key things are investment, tourism, education, and broadening the socio-economic links between the two countries. That's what we're all about. Some of the key highlights that I like to talk about, and there have been a few when you start to think about it. The Unlimited Mind Tesla exhibition, we were heavily involved in that event. The Glutch project, an amazing event. Sorry, it's not an event. An amazing opportunity of Sydney University and Sydney Grammar School being involved in the archaeological exploration in Sremska Mitrovica. So this is a huge opportunity for ties at the level of education. Trade fairs. So we were involved in the Melbourne Trade Fair. That was a couple of years ago. And I know that currently the Melbourne chapter is working on the Fine Food Fair in Melbourne and looking to have some potential Serbian companies involved there. We are affiliated members with the European Australia Business Council, and their president, Jason Collins, actually apologised for not being here today. He's interstate. But as a few of us know, because we're part of that ecosystem, it means that we have access to, you know, the European chambers. We also have good relationships with AmCham as well. So, as I was mentioning earlier on, if any time in the future a Serbian delegation or a major politician was to come out, we can help serve that opportunity by, you know, ensuring that we can not only be involved, but we can bring the British Chamber in, the American Chamber and the like. I've talked a lot about the diplomatic corps. We have strong links with Austrade, which is very important. We have a link with the Serbian Chamber of Commerce in Belgrade, so that's important as well. So any businesses or aspiring businesses or opportunities that you may foresee in Serbia, we can help establish that link. We were involved in the Djokovic visa issue. Again, it came across as a much more powerful message when there was a chamber involved, and our messaging was to say, you know, the unfortunate events of you know, Djokovic not being allowed to play the Australian Open. We were concerned as a chamber in the impact that would have between, you know, Serbian and Australian trade relations. So it was a much stronger message than just having, you know, a priest go on TV and say, oh, he should be allowed to play. And nothing wrong with that, by the way, but it's just that different messaging and really strengthens our community. And last but not least, one of our members has graciously made contact with the Serbian National Assembly, and there's actually a friendship group within the Serbian Parliament. So again, another opportunity where we can try and showcase the link that we have with Serbia. And I must say that I wrote to, it's Jelena Milošević is the parliamentarian's name, and just to let her know that this event is happening, that there's a massive Serbian festival happening, which members of the Serbian Orthodox Youth Association are here with us today. And I mean, these types of events really help to promote, you know, the massive contribution that the Australian Serbian community has made. So that's pretty much us in a nutshell. And I'll hand over to His Excellency. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Stefan. Hello from myself. I have a pleasure to meeting some of you earlier, so it's good to see you again, and some of you to see and meet today for the first time. As you have heard, my name is Rade Stefanović. I'm ambassador of the Republic of Serbia to the Commonwealth of Australia and New Zealand and some other Pacific Island countries. I'm here for a year now, and pleasure to be. I have since the beginning. I had a opportunity to establish the links and with the Australian Serbian Commerce Chamber. I think we had a really good year behind us now, and looking forward for the plans. I will come to that during my speech later on for some project. So I have divided. I mean, to try to give you some perspective in a nutshell. I mean, this is the main chapters. I will talk something about general context. Some of Stefan mentioned the general atmosphere after the end of COVID pandemic and between the Serbia and Australia, with Nova case especially, some current political relations in the field of economy, general economic situation in Serbia, and some other future cooperation. These days actually mark almost exact a year of my mandate here in Australia. The beginning of the mandate was definitely really specific one, with not just having in mind that the end of COVID-19 and start to reopening, but we had two major cases, actually major issues, which actually reflected the general atmosphere in the relations between the Serbia and Australia. One being, as Stevan mentioned, the case of Novak Djokovic and the deportation of our best tennis player, visa ban, 3-year ban, and the other was, of course, Rio Tinto saga and some of the decisions or the decisions of the government of Republic of Serbia to pause or to stop certain activities which were on the way for several years. Of course, those were like those two events had a huge impact and marked basically the relations even between the two countries. I remember, you mentioned the parliament, I remember my hearing in the parliament before I came here in January 2022, where there was a group of colleagues, group of ambassadors, among them my good friend and colleague who is now our ambassador to Brussels, and I have to, and our MPs, you know, like was asking us who is who and you know where you're going or how you're going to Brussels. Okay, are you going to Australia? That's now the key issue, which is like something which is not a regular thing. I mean, therefore, I mean, of course, it had the impact on the general relations, general atmosphere, the field also of economy, but also to the negative effect to the people-to-people contacts. You know, some bad sentiments occurred, not only in Belgrade. That was like final weeks of my preparation. I was still in Belgrade, but in mind very much also here. I got a lot of phone calls at that time, you know, and you know, the people were asking where is our ambassador to do, or with some also, I would say, not realistic expectations, you know, that if the ambassador were here, you know, he would send a SWAT team and rescue Novak or something. It was like really something which is not so, but that was the sentiment in general population. Of course, we are all really sensitive about when Novak is, when it's about Novak and the whole treatment, but that was the situation at that time. And of course, the embassy here, we got a lot of the colleagues which I was in touch with, got a lot of unpleasant phone calls from both, you know, Serbs calling, why don't you are doing enough, or sending the SWAT team or whatever, and Australians with some not so pleasant language, you know, and really negative messages, which I won't come back to that now. So of course, the first priority actually was, upon my arrival, was some kind of damage control and try to do some kind of normalization, you know, to try to see that. We had, I'm really now, a year after, I'm really proud and happy to say that in this last year we managed to actually two important issues which we had in bilateral relations to solve. One being Novak, of course, to be able to compete here and to finish that saga with a 10th title in the best possible way, that we can all close that chapter now in a much better spirit and in much better atmosphere to do. And the other thing is, of course, being the signing of the bilateral agreement on social security. The agreement which was signed on 20th January this year between Minister Selakovic and my colleague Daniel Emery, Australian ambassador in Belgrade. After more than 10 years of negotiations, we managed to with a couple of rounds and negotiations, actually in end of 2021 and a couple in 2022 to finish that also that issue, to close it, to finally sign the agreement. The agreement who is has a really tremendous importance not only for the Serbian community or the people who basically divided their lives between Serbia and Australia, but also with the business people and the business community and the impact which will have in that sense. I mean, of course, on both issues, I have to say we had a really good cooperation with the current Australian government. In a way, not to interfere into the internal matters in Australia, but in a way we were lucky because the people of Australia decided to change the government, to have a Labour Party in power. We had at the beginning on both issues, we had a really good cooperation with them, open opportunity to present our position of the Republic of Serbia, of the government, of the people of Serbia, of the Serbs in Australia on both these issues. And I have to say both the Home Affairs and Immigration and Minister Giles and Minister Mandarish for the social services were really of great help to bring this to its end. In that way, now we are like with much more optimism and with a little bit cleaner table, we can move forward. Hopefully that we will have this agreement ratified in like next 3 to 6 months, which will have then enter into force late this year or the beginning of the next. Of course, that's something actually which, as I mentioned, with agreement on social security, which is definitely will have also a huge impact. That's actually one. After years, we had a new bilateral agreement with Australia, a very important one, which we were pushing for years. Between also several of my predecessors were also working on it. And it's something which actually will benefit also the business community and of course the people. So in that sense, you know, with the current political relations, I mean, now with those two issues aside, we have a much way of optimism, you know, to look forward to. Of course, relations are in generally good. I mean, of course, my firm belief is there is a huge potential for their improvement, for intensifying political dialogue, contact, not only the high-level contacts, which we didn't have for quite a while, not only with the COVID pandemic, but in general. Our last minister who was here was in 2012, actually, Minister of Interior. Australian Foreign Minister was in Belgrade in 2017. So I want to be a realistic, and I'm a realistic person. So of course that both countries have their own priorities. Australia, Pacific, Southeastern Asia, that's something like for Serbia, like the neighborhood, the Western Balkans, or the EU. That's something which is like normal and legitimate. But I think that our two countries have much bigger potential to have more contacts and more political also cooperation, but also cooperation in the other fields, economic, cultural, education, and so on. So in that way, actually, we started as a preparatory work to say for some high-level visit. I do hope that we will this year we will have a so-called bilateral political consultation on the level of two foreign ministries, and of course there is we are working. Stefan mentioned, and we would just talk about this parliamentary group of friendship, which is actually I would say a regular thing in the National Assembly of the Republic of Serbia. We had every mandate of the National Assembly, we had a similar group, unlike the situation here in Australia. For example, in last sitting of the Parliament, we didn't have a country group. We are working now on that. I am happy to say that now we have more than 30 federal senators and MPs who are interested to join the group, and I do hope that we'll, in a matter of weeks, actually, that we will have a country group here in the federal parliament of Australia, and that also the parliamentarians will be who have a really valuable role in the diplomacy, and they are much less formal, I would say, than the two governments, and that they will have actually start to get in contact with each other. One of the good things which we learned during the bad things and the pandemic, that also is the video meetings also, which for the distance we have, also that would be, in my opinion, good start also to connect both politicians and the businessmen. Of course, there are issues, I mean, that two countries don't share the same opinion. One of them, which is of paramount importance for the Republic of Serbia, is of course issue of Kosovo and Metohija. Unfortunately, Australia, as you are aware, recognized unilaterally declared independence. That's something which the Serbia doesn't look good upon and well. And I mean, in that sense, especially now when we hear that with the current crisis and the conflict in Ukraine, when the principles of territorial integrity, sovereignty of the countries are getting more and more important, I mean, and that majority of the world now arguing to that, I mean, it's always, and I have now also, when I ask the Australian colleagues now, I mean, I know that they won't change their opinion, but it's interesting to hear and to ask them in this position, because I have moral and pretty comfortable position to say that Serbia is a principle about that, also in the case of Ukraine and also in the case of Serbia itself. So, and that says, and the positive thing is that the majority of the world actually is sharing that opinion, even though so the majority of the UN member states are actually supporting the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Serbia. You are all aware that, I mean, the Belgrade-Pristina dialogue, who is ongoing, also the importance, and I will come back to that later, maybe with the importance of political stability for the economy and economic cooperation. So, I mean, generally, to refocus a little bit more now to the economy. I mean, our bilateral economic cooperation between Serbia and Australia takes mainly through the exchange of goods. It's something which we have actually two most important things. Every year we have a constant growth. We have a strong positive trend that every year we have a trading goods and services exchange are growing and growing. On the other hand, to be realistic, those are a small number. Those are a small number for even for Serbia, let alone for the Australia's perspectives. Those are, according to the latest, actually, in 2022, we had 57.4 million euros. So that would mean around 90 million Australian dollars in trade exchange. With actually first time with import and export according to the Serbian data, which is different also from Australian one, and it's really hard to tell you to combine those things to combine. And I'll share some of the data with you. I mean, but they are, I mean, hard to follow, and it's partly different methodology, partly because generally the way how the paying is going is not usually actually. Some of the Australian companies are not paying directly for example, from Australia, but for some European branches, or doing the trade towards them, and that would then reflect to the direct trade. So Serbia's export to Australia were in the amount of 29.08 million euros. Imports were 28.27 million euros also. So that's almost closely. I will now come to the structure. Actually, we had a huge growth of Australian actually imports to Serbia in the previous year. These figures are, as I said, when you see even for Serbia standards, you know that, for example, with Hungary, we have being a neighboring country, more than 1 billion euros of exchange coming to 2. It's something. These are like really small number, but the trend is positive, and I know it's easy. I mean, with the small numbers to have a higher growth rate. But for example, in the last couple of years we had compared to 2001, 38% growth rate in the total trade exchange. In 2021, in compared to 2020, 43%. So those are pretty high growth rates. I mean, even though coming back, being realistic, I mean, it's easier, of course, to grow with 100 million to 120 or 140 than with I don't know, 1 billion to go with that kind of rate. I mean, in our general structure, actually, the products which are mostly exported from Serbia to Australia actually are washing and cleaning products. That's actually something which are foreign investments who, like Henkel, who privatized or invest in the Serbian companies or having production in Serbia, they are exporting worldwide, and that's actually something which is beneficial also to the Serbian exports, Australia included. Of course, mineral and chemical fertilizers. We had even in last year 1.5 million euros hard drives for the computers. So that's something which is, of course, frozen berries in different kind, alcohol drinks, something which would be other vegetables and products, something which would be expectable. On the import side, according to the Serbia data, the most imported products from Australia are actually raw materials, so aluminum, raw, unalloyed, and what is something which we didn't have actually in the previous year, that's iron ore. So iron ore in both, and some concentrates in both forms, actually almost 40% of Australian export or Serbian import from Australia in 2022 was in iron ore. So that's something which was not present in the previous year, and that's something which actually mostly, because we always had Serbia always, even now, has a small surplus, but that's something which actually made this trade balance in the mostly in the balance. I will just give you, not to take too much time, you know, some of Australian data. Raw skin, medicaments, civil engineering equipment, food processing machines, specialized machinery. That's actually, according to the Australian data, are the products which have been mostly actually exported to Serbia. I would like to say some of the, general economic situation in Serbia. Maybe that would be interesting for the people who are considering actually doing business with Serbia or trading with Serbia or are present in Serbia. Actually, we are all aware of the global crisis and global problems, not only with the pandemic, which is at its end, but also with the crisis in Ukraine, which actually had a significant impact worldwide. We are all witnesses of the prices of food, of petrol, of inflation rate. So of course that's not it's something which is actually worldwide having impact. However, I really am proud to say that Serbian economy has shown really high degree of resilience actually to those all external shocks which are not actually sourced from Serbia, but globally. Measures also. After Serbia successfully coped actually with the health economic crisis, even in the years of pandemic, with the measures timely implemented. We had even in 2020, 2021 also cumulative GDP growth of 6.6, which was one actually of the best results in Europe. There was a package of economic measures being introduced, which actually gave a pretty good results, or actually diminished the negative results, which were actually the trend to the economies in general. Serbia's current unemployment rate is 8.9%, which is actually historic low. So that's something which is compared, for example, in 2019 when it was 11.2. So in these 3 years, even it was a crisis year, even it was the years with the pandemic and the general global crisis, the unemployment rate actually continued employment rate continued to grow, unemployment to go lower. Not to say like the data 10 years ago, with almost 50% people which were unemployed, especially in the category of the youth. One of the sectors which I will actually also come back to in my last part is actually IT. So IT sector is one of the biggest growing sectors in Serbia in general. IT services which are actually provided their percentage also is higher and higher, and that's actually one of the sectors which has biggest potential actually now and in the future with this kind of growth rate. So even with now, in this year, there is still no exact data for the GDP in 2022. Preliminary estimates, it should be growth of 2.3% year on year, which is actually pretty good result, having in mind all these effects and all these crisis, which especially crisis in Ukraine, which had the impact worldwide. I mean, also that growth will be also is actually industrial production growth, but it's a result actually of industrial growth rate, service sector growth, and service sector growth rate, which I already mentioned, especially IT services. I mean, in this, of course, like in Australia, at the beginning of 2022, actually the GDP was above 4%. Then in the third and fourth quarter, we had a slowing down of the economy, similar to Australia. We had the latest data, which are much more unoptimistic than like 3 or 6 months ago. So that was also the case with Serbia. So the economy generally was slowing down, but it's estimated it would be 2.3 GDP growth rate in 2022. With the perspective actually that after the beginning of 2023, that actually the situation will be better and we will continue this positive trend, and the projected GDP for 2023 is basically between 2 and 3% at this moment now. In general, when I gave you some of the data on the trade volume between Serbia and Australia, just to share maybe with in general, trade in goods in 2022 was, for the Republic of Serbia, was 67.13 billion euros. And it was like with the exports of 28 billion euros, imports in 38 billion euros. So there is still, of course, the better, I mean, actually the imports in general had a higher growth rate, especially with the price. That's mainly the consequence, actually, the increase of energy costs and the fuel and oil and gas, which is actually one of which Serbia imports. And with these higher prices, the volume of imports also was better. Of course, EU being the #1 Serbia's trading partner, which is no surprise, 2/3 of Serbian actually exchange of goods and services are oriented towards to the EU. The second biggest partners actually are Western Balkan countries, with almost 10% of Serbia's export and import going there. When it comes to the countries of Asia, actually they participate with 15% in total trade of goods with Serbia. I mean, actually the leading markets are China, Republic of Korea, and Japan. So Australia is not among the top of them. Trade in services, as I mentioned, that's the section with a huge potential, with the huge growth rates. There is no actually yet data for the whole 2022. For the first 11 months of 2022, we had a 44.8% growth of the export of ICT services, which are already actually reached 2.4 billion euros annually. So it's something which is with a surplus of 1.7 billion euros. That's something which is huge. That's something which is actually a lot of foreign companies are outsourcing their businesses, with Serbia offering really highly educated labor force, and on the other hand, still much more cheaper than in their own countries. So the ICT, basically, this section was become the largest net export branch of Serbia in these years. Generally, I mean, actually, it was foreseen that Serbia in 2020, actually, first time in its history, reached this so-called investment rating. I mean, due to the crisis, global economic crisis, but mostly influenced from the conflict in Ukraine. Actually, at this moment, Serbia obtained and kept the stable rating with some of the most important companies like S&P's or Fitch, leveling to the BB plus, or so this so-called A or AAA minus, or this kind of rating is something which is actually visible already, foreseeable, and we do hope that it will be matter of like 1 or 2 years before the Serbia can reach it. One important thing also, for example, you know, the trend for foreign direct investment. Foreign direct investment in Serbia, even though with all these not to repeat myself, but with all these effects, negative effects globally are still extremely high. I mean, in 2020, actually it was like 4.4 billion euros of foreign direct investment, which actually is 13% more of the record year of 2021. So in that sense, that's something which we are very proud of. Australian foreign direct investment from Australia to Serbia in 2021 was around 3 million euros. For the first 9 months actually in 2022 were 2.3 million euros. So it's questionable at this moment will be able to have it to higher than in 2021, but they are still around 3 million euros annually from Australia to Serbia. And of course, we are welcoming this is something which is very important to us, and we want to provide the safe environment, stable environment for the in general in foreign investments, of course, and then Australia included. Maybe just to share also the inflation rate due to all these factors, of course, rate is now higher than it was in 2020 or 2019. Into average inflation in 2022 was 11.9%, and year-on-year inflation in December was around 50%, which is actually again mostly contributed to the higher energy prices of food, petrol, and actually the petrol prices who are then influence all the other structure of all other prices. But I mean, in 2000, usually before that, it was around 2% per year with a stable foreign dinar and foreign exchange rate. And so in the second, it is estimated that in the second half of 2023, actually, that it will start to go down again, and in the second half of 2024 to be on this regular level of like 2%, which would be regular. I mean, potential for further cooperation. I mean, my personal belief, of course, and the governments, of course, that we can do better. I mean, we can all do better. I mean, having in mind that I'm speaking also with some of the in this audience with some of the also businessmen present. I mean, we definitely. I mean, the potential for further improvement of these numbers undoubtedly exists. I mean, with some of the key areas being like the agriculture and food production, mining, renewable sources of energy, environmental protection, IT, as I already mentioned, and outsourcing. I mentioned in the beginning, you know, the cooperation that embassy and the contact established with the Australian Serbian Commerce Chamber. For this year, we are actually doing. We have a plan, you know, ambitious plan to have some actually Serbian companies to one of the on two fairs in Australia, one being actually held Fine Foods Australia here in Sydney in September. It would be actually after years that Serbian companies in organized way actually participate in that. I do hope we are still not there yet, but we are, you know, on a good track. So I do hope that in September here we will have the state stand on the fair, and that our companies could present their businessmen and actually to engage with face-to-face with the partners. Of course, I mentioned importance of Australian investors here. I mean, also to expand our contractual and legal framework of cooperation. I mentioned Social Security Agreement, which was one thing. Now, actually moving on, next priorities for myself, for the Republic of Serbia, actually is the, let's call it, economic package, to have like two really important bilateral agreements, one of being agreement on mutual protection of investments, and other, of course, avoiding double taxation. Agreement on avoiding double taxation is actually really like a tricky thing, not just for Serbia, but for some certain EU countries. That's something which is actually, I have to say, also with my colleagues of some EU countries who are really frustrating, because also the negotiations on that agreement with Australia are taking quite some time. Of course, Australia focused on a free trade agreement with the European Union. Serbia as a candidate country and a country who is in the process of negotiations. Accession talks will not be the benefit immediately of that kind of agreement, so we have to work in the framework we have at this moment. Significant potential, of course, cooperation in the field of mining, and I'm not talking just about Rio Tinto in this sense, but actually almost a dozen so-called junior miners, Australian companies. Some of them I've met with in Queensland, of course in Perth and Western Australia, where I think the centre is, who had a really successful project in Serbia, who are actually for several years are now present in Serbia doing geological research and exploration, and actually with really good results and with a really good potential, with not only just the lithium borates, which are now really in to talk about, but also with the gold, copper, zinc, and other accompanying elements. So there is definitely a room and space for fostering cooperation and boosting political stability, being one of most important things. That's something which is really important to the Serbian government, and have always in mind, to provide a safe environment for investments. There are challenges, of course, globally, internally, being also I mentioned the status of Kosovo and Metohija, which can have their repercussions and the consequences, of course, in the other fields. I mean, but we are, in the embassy, myself, are also open, to explore, to try to help all interesting parties, interesting companies from Australia to get in touch with the Serbian companies, potential partners, Serbian partners, to find that that's something actually like also our role, and we are ready to play our role and to do our job. In connecting people. I sound like Nokia, but in that sense. And I can even, we had actually even the interest for Serbian companies. I can immediately actually offer potential partners for Serbia in the field of organic production of berries, with a huge exporter actually is looking for the partners here. With Frigo containers also, the company who is actually exporting on the EU market, exporting in America now wants actually, and it takes courage, to go to step in the new markets. So whatever, whatever you think or feel, you are, of course, you and your friends or your partners are, you are more than welcome to contact the embassy, the chamber, and to see what will they, and to take it from there. Maybe it's a good time to stop, actually, for me now. If I would happy to take any questions, maybe if there are some. Otherwise, thank you very much for this opportunity once again to the Chamber of Commerce. Thank you for coming. And the ones who I have not met, I'm looking forward to, after this official part to talk also with you. Thank you.
I'll just invite Nenad to our next guest speaker to come up. Just while Nenad's getting ready, please feel free to sit down if it's more comfortable. And again, I think we'll any Q&A we'll probably leave to the end.
On the way over, I realized I didn't write an introduction in any way, so I just jotted this. So excuse me from reading from my phone. Dobro veče, ja sam Nenad Petrović, demografski konsultant iz Melbourna. Hvala vam na pozivu, hvala celoj Australijsko-srpskoj privrednoj komori na pozivu da doveče pričam i opisujem naš narod i ljude srpskog porekla kroz statistike australijskog popisa. Pozdrav i veliko poštovanje našem ambasadoru Radetu Stefanoviću. Lepo i ohrabrujuće čuti sve što ste učinili za našu Srbiju ovde u Australiji i za državne odnose od kad ste došli ovde. Posebno sam srećan što posle više od godinu dana komunikacije i razgovora imam šansu da upoznam gospodina Stevana Šipku. I iako naši ljudi kažu pričaj srpski da te ceo svet razume, moju prezentaciju ću nastaviti na engleskom u slučaju ovde da neko ne razume srpski. Hvala. So what is the census? You might remember that in 2021, you filled in a census here if you happen to be in Australia. A census is a 5-yearly survey of everyone who happens to be in the country at that time, visitors or residents. That's exactly what I just said. The response rate in 2021 was 95.8%. It's up 1% from 2016. And if you think of all the different expanses and remote communities that are in Australia, think of the outback, think of that, that's pretty good. Now, the information that you can get from the census is available at various geographic levels. So from your block to your neighbourhood to your suburb, your city, your greater capital city, your state, and so on. So it's very powerful information that can be used to really create catchments and understand things and how they play out on a spatial level. And there are millions of query combinations of census information. And the 2021 census was unique because it was held during a pandemic. So who uses the census? Well, we've got government agencies who inform policies and planning, things like health, education, transport and housing. We've got businesses who inform operations, understand market research, site selection and workforce planning too. Researchers and academics, so in social science, economics, demography and public health. Non-government organisations, they inform advocacy, develop programs and services from communities by making informed decisions. And everyone else, so you can use it too to understand your community, plan for the future, help your local sports club, and help with grant applications, for example. Now, this whole presentation, by the way, has been designed as a resource that you can take away. So if some of these charts and things are not seen on such a small screen, I'll just talk through them, but you can view them in your own time later on. So the presentation is going to be ko smo, who are we? Koliko smo stari, how old are we? Gde živimo, where do we live? Kako živimo, how do we live? Šta radimo, what do we do? And kako smo, how are we? So to start off with, who are we? So there are really 3 different ways to define Serbs in the Australian census. There are people who were born in Serbia, those who stated that they have Serbian ancestry, and then those who say that they speak the Serbian language. So some of you here might be born in Serbia and have Serbian ancestry and speak Serbian language like me. Others might be born in Australia but have Serbian ancestry and maybe speak or not speak the Serbian language. So there are different ways to understand it, and they're all different definitions which come with different characteristics. But I've focused on mainly the 2 that I'll show, and then I'll kind of, as I go through the presentation, just talk about people with Serbian ancestry. But I'll just show you some differences of people, say, born in Serbia versus the ones who have Serbian ancestry. This here is a chart, again, apologies if you can't make out the numbers, but it's the number of Serbian-born people living in Australia from 1996 to 2021. In 1996, that number was 50,500. This was also a time when we had high levels of migration to Australia from Serbia and the rest of the Balkans with what was going on there. The highest number we had was in 1999, which was 52,000. And then since then, it's kind of declined. Now, whether in the early 2000s there was a lot of movement back to Serbia or elsewhere in the world outside of Australia, and since then it's just kind of declined a little bit until 2021, where we are now at 31,300 people born in Serbia. The reason populations such as these decrease is if there are different eras of migration to a country, then as those people get older, they pass away. You might be more familiar with the stories that kind of get told in the news are maybe Greek or Italian post-World War II communities who were huge in number here, and a lot of those people are now kind of getting to their autumn years. But people with Serbian ancestry has actually followed a different trend. So that's been increasing over the last 2 censuses. So between 2011 and 2016, Serbian ancestry has increased by 7.7%. And between 2016 and 2021 by 11%. So in 2021, we had 116,000 people in Australia identifying as having Serbian ancestry. That's quite a large increase from 10 years ago. And in terms of people who speak Serbian at home, that's kind of been plateauing probably from 2006 to 2021 at around 52 to 57,000 people. Between 2011 and 16, there was a slight decrease, But again, between 2016 and 21, just like with Ancestry, we saw a large increase of 6.5% of people who speak Serbian at home. And when did Serbs arrive in Australia? Now, you might not be able to make out these numbers, but they're different eras of migration, going back to 1905, which naturally will have a low proportion, as a lot of those people aren't with us anymore. So we can see that 1960 to 1970, about 20% of all Serbian-born people who live in Australia right now moved to Australia then. Then that kind of declines a little bit until we get to the 90s. And in the 90s, that number was 27%. So almost close to 3 in 10 Serbian-born people living in Australia came to Australia during that period. These numbers are interesting, the ones that we call recent arrivals, so the ones who arrived in the most recent recorded period. Almost 9% of all Serbian-born people came to Australia between 2011 and 2020. And 0.2%, and sorry I don't actually have the actual number there, arrived in that last bit before the census, which was in 2021. A lot of those might be returning residents who maybe were locked out of Australia during COVID. So where were Serbian speakers born? This first big chart shows you that 33% of people who speak Serbian were born in Serbia. But close behind it, 32% were born in Australia. So to say that a lot of our people who speak the language are actually born here, meaning that languages, traditions, customs continue. The other countries there's one that keeps creeping up, was this one that people put as Southeastern Europe, no further defined, so that kind of clumps it all into one area. Bosnia and Herzegovina and Croatia as the other languages, as the other countries. So in the 2021 census, there were actually 51 countries of birth for people who spoke the Serbian language, and some of them are quite out there. We had 31 people who were born in Iraq who speak Serbian, 10 born in the Philippines, 6 born in India, and 4 born in Botswana. That's not to say that maybe their parents at some stage didn't move there and that they didn't come to Australia. And where were people with Serbian ancestry born? The red charts here show 2011 and the blue ones show 2021. In 2011, only 41% of people with Serbian ancestry were born in Australia. By 2021, that's jumped to 50% now. So it goes to say that maybe our second and third generations here, who are established here, are still identifying as having Serbian ancestry, which is quite encouraging. Whereas the proportion who are actually born in Serbia who have Serbian ancestry has remained about the same over that 10-year period. Now we actually have some Aboriginal Australians with Serbian ancestry too. So in 2011, almost 300 people with Serbian ancestry were Aboriginal, representing 0.3% of all Australian residents with Serbian ancestry. Koliko smo stari? So how old are we? Well, the median age of all of Australia is 38 years. The median age of Serbian-born people is 56 years. And the median age of people with Serbian ancestry is 40 years. So we're almost just slightly older, the Serbian ancestry component is slightly older than the Australian average. Again, ignore this if you can't see it from there, but really what it's showing is that the 5-year age groups and the proportion in blue of Serbian ancestry residents and in red Australia. So there are more Australians aged 20 to 34 than Serbs, and there are more Australians aged 75 plus than Serbs. But in the middle, we've got a higher proportion of Serbs aged 45 to 74 than the Australian average. And if we compare Serbian-born residents to the ones that have Serbian ancestry, you see a huge difference. Blue is Serbian ancestry, red is Serbian-born. We see that there is a huge difference in the younger population, where the younger population is predominantly Serbian ancestry residents, but the older age groups are predominantly where the Serbian-born residents are, showing us that really that population is aging and has been aging for a long time, just because of those eras of migration where most people came are just kind of going through the different life stages. Gde živimo? So where do we live? 38% of us live in New South Wales and 32% live in Victoria. 11% in Queensland, 8% in South Australia, 9% in WA. A lot of this will be proportional to the sizes of those states anyway, but actually there is a disproportional population of Serbs who live in New South Wales and Victoria. And by capital city, 31% live in Sydney, 28% live in Melbourne, 9% in Perth, 7% in Adelaide, 7% in Brisbane, and with some other smaller ones. So we are urban dwellers. 85% of people with Serbian ancestry live in a greater capital city, and that's higher than the 65% for Australia as a whole. Now, Serbs by suburb. What do you think is the suburb with the largest population of Serbia in Australia? Hey. Yeah, chokoladna bananica for you later. So there were 2,136 people in Liverpool. The top 5 were Liverpool, or over 2,100 people, Dandenong in Victoria, over 1,400 people, Bonnyrigg Heights in Bonnyrigg, 750, Cabramatta West and Mount Pritchard, 700, and West Hoxton and Middleton Grange, 612. If we look at population growth since the last census, Liverpool grew by 157 people of Serbian ancestry, West Hoxton and Middleton Grange by 121, Rockbank and Mount Cottrell down in Victoria by 117, Wallet also down outside Melbourne and 95 people, and Hoxton Park, 78 people. Now a couple of these like Rockbank and Wallet are actually growth areas, so a lot of growth and population growth is happening there, and just I guess some of them happen to be people of Serbian ancestry. Population grows as a result of in-migration and births. If we look at population decline, so areas which have declined in population of people with Serbian ancestry, Cabramatta and Lansvale, Melton in Victoria, 86 people, Canley Vale and Canley Heights, 67 people, Keilor East, down also in Melbourne, 66 people, and Sunbury South, 29 people. And be mindful that also population decline can be a result of people moving out of the place or deaths. So, kako živimo? How do we live? What is that? 54% of us live in as couple families with children. So that means you could be a child in that family or you could be the parents in that family. 14% live as one-parent families, and for those two categories, there's a higher proportion of people with Serbian ancestry living in those arrangements than the Australian average. On the other hand, there is a lower proportion of people with Serbian ancestry living in couple without children households, and a lower proportion of lone person households. So we'll have more of us living in families with children. Almost 1 in 5 live as couples without children, and this could represent the younger cohort, so maybe young people living together, but also older people, empty nesters you might call them, where the children have left home and the older people have stayed, live together. And 1 in 10 live alone. Now, compared to Australia as a whole, it's more common for Serbs to live in a family with children or in a one-parent family, and less common to live alone or in a couple family without children. So there were also 1,022 people of Serbian ancestry living in what's defined as non-private dwellings. Non-private dwellings are things like aged care facilities, boarding houses, predominantly aged care facilities in Australia, but it also includes things like prisons, working accommodation. So think of if you've ever been out in WA and you see they've got all those permanent temporary worker accommodation, that's the kind of thing that's counted. 378 people of Serbian ancestry lived in nursing homes or retirement homes in 2021. If we look at housing tenure, so how's your house? How's your house owned? Is it owned? Is it under a mortgage? Is it rented? A larger proportion of people with Serbian ancestry own with a mortgage than the Australian average, shown in red. A similar proportion own outright, so that's about 30%, and a lower proportion of households where people of Serbian ancestry lived are rented. And in terms of household size, that being 1-bedroom houses, this being 5 or more bedroom houses, we see that people of Serbian ancestry live in larger households. So as we get into 3, 4 and 5 bedroom households, we see the blue bar being higher. So we live in larger households than the Australian average, but given what I showed a couple of slides ago, that more of us live in families, that kind of goes hand in hand. Now, šta radimo? So what do we do? 23% of all people with Serbian ancestry attended an educational institution in 2021. A lot of that will be related to the age structure. If you've got a very young population, then naturally you'll have a lot more people attending primary, secondary school, tertiary education and so on. So we've got 19% of that 23%, mind you, 19% attended a university, 8% attended a vocational institution or a TAFE, and the two highest ones are the ones that are kind of like mandatory education. So 32% in primary school, 27% in secondary school, 7% in preschool. And the top 5 fields of study of people with Serbian ancestry who have completed a degree or a qualification were management and commerce at 21%, engineering and related technologies at 19%, society and culture at 14%. These can all be broken down further, but for brevity I've stuck it all in one. Architecture and building 8%, and health 8%. And the highest educational qualification, so this is looking at everyone aged over the age of 15 and asking what's your highest educational qualification that you have obtained. For 26% of us, it was secondary school, so year 10 or above. 17% had no qualification, 14% had a bachelor degree level, and certificate level also at 14%, with an advanced diploma or a diploma at 10%. And in terms of employment status, so I'll just go forward because there's an important stat here. 62% of all people with Serbian ancestry aged 15 plus are in the labour force. So labour force includes anyone who is employed or unemployed but looking for work. And that's what these stats here show. So of those people who are employed, 58% are in full-time employment, 28% in part-time employment. So there's a slightly higher proportion of us that are employed who work full-time rather than part-time. And that labour force participation rate is slightly higher than that of Australia. So 94.5% employment rate for people with Serbian ancestry, and 94.9% is the employment rate for all of Australia, so slightly lower. And the top industries, the top 5 industries of employment for people with Serbian ancestry are construction, 13%, and healthcare and social assistance. This is followed by retail trade, professional, scientific and technical services, and education and training. And we have a higher representation in the construction and retail trade and professional science and tech services industries, and lower representation in health and education and training. And the top 5 occupations of employment, and again, these are just larger groups that can be broken down into the specifics. Professionals, 23% are professionals. We'll see a lot here. 14% are technicians and trades workers. 14% clerical and admin workers, 13% managers, and 10% labourers. And we've got a higher representation in the technical workers and labourers and clerical and admin workers compared to all of Australia, and a slightly lower representation in the professionals and managers. So the median weekly household income, now focusing on household incomes and low and high income families. People of Serbian ancestry households had a median weekly household income of $2,215 per week. In Australia, this was only $1,740 per week. So you could say that people of Serbian ancestry have household incomes that are 27% higher than Australia. But again, coming back to some of that household composition we saw before, that could also include, say, if you had children living at home with you who are also earning incomes, that would be combined in the household income statistics. In terms of low and high income households, low income households are defined as any household that earns less than $800 per week. 15% of our Serbian ancestry households are low income households compared to 21% of Australia. And on the other hand, 1/3 of Serbian ancestry households are actually high income households. So those with more than $3,000 of household income per week compared to 23% of Australia. Now looking at some unpaid work statistics. So these are things that look at unpaid domestic care, unpaid childcare, unpaid care provided to people with a disability or age-related issues. 8% of people with Serbian ancestry aged 15 and over volunteered through a group or an organisation compared to 14% of Australia. So it's slightly lower. And one thing that we noticed in the 2021 census is that volunteering statistics all over Australia dropped as purely because of COVID restrictions. There was the inability to partake in maybe some of the volunteering habits that people had before. So I predict that by 2026 we'll probably see a bounce back of that. In terms of providing unpaid care to a person with disability or long-term illness or age, 15% of people with Serbian ancestry provided unpaid care compared to 12% of Australia as a whole. Unpaid childcare, 20% of people with Serbian ancestry provided unpaid childcare, and that's identical to the Australian average. And 5% of people with Serbian ancestry provided unpaid childcare for other children, so children that are not your own. So they could be babas and dedas, or looking after your nieces, nephews, that sort of thing. And again, that's the same as the Australian average. And in terms of unpaid domestic work, so this is the first chart says did no domestic work at home, and then it goes to less than 5 hours, 5 to 15 hours, 15 to 29, and 30 or more. A slightly larger proportion of people with Serbian ancestry did no domestic work. Oops. And a slightly larger proportion than Australia did 5 hours or 5 to 14 hours of domestic work. But again, if we break that down by sex, for people of Serbian ancestry, 14% of women and only 3% of men did any kind of unpaid domestic work at home. Youth disengagement, so this is important too. This is looking at 15 to 24-year-olds who are disengaged from education or employment. So these are really people in an age group where they should be involved in one of those two things. Otherwise, I guess they've fallen through some sort of a gap in society. So there's a slightly lower proportion of Serbian ancestry 15 to 24-year-olds who aren't involved in education or employment, 8.5 compared to 9.1 in Australia. And finally, kako smo, so how are we? 8% of people with Serbian ancestry have a need for assistance due to a disability. And this is a statistic that's highly correlated with age. This is compared to almost 6% for Australia. And if we look at that, you can just see that each one of those bars shows the proportion of people in that age group that have a need for assistance due to disability. When you get to 85 plus, that's almost 70% of people in that age cohort. So almost 7,900 people of Serbian ancestry had a need for assistance due to disability, representing 8.3%. Disability is strongly correlated with age, and almost 68% of people with Serbian ancestry aged 85 plus had a need for assistance due to disability. This is important because I know I've seen it in my work. I've dealt with some councils who try and find maybe the appropriate kind of care, culturally appropriate care for residents from a certain cultural background. So in the LGA I live in down in Melbourne, they have some Greek aged care facilities and so on. So this is kind of information that can be used to inform any kind of investment or advocacy for those sorts of things. Now, in terms of long-term health conditions, so in the 2021 census, for the first time, they asked people about long-term health conditions, which ended up being Australia's biggest health survey ever. We have, I think I'll just go straight to the bullet points for this one. 25% of people with Serbian ancestry had at least one long-term health condition. For Australia as a whole, this was a much higher 32%. 2.6% of people with Serbian ancestry had 3 or more long-term health conditions, so some serious health conditions, and this represented about 2,500 people. And the most common condition was mental health, which includes depression and anxiety, followed by arthritis, which is related to age. And where we differed to the Australian average, people with Serbian ancestry had significantly low levels of asthma. So to wrap it up, some key findings from this is that there are many different ways to define Serbs or someone being Serbian in the census. Serbian ancestry has been increasing despite the number of Serbian-born people decreasing over time. We are older than the national average. 70% of us live in New South Wales or Victoria, even though the population of those two places makes up 59% of Australian population. And many of us live in family households. Most households that we do live in are owned with a mortgage. Management, commerce, and engineering are our top fields of study, and more of us are employed full-time than part-time compared to the national average. More of us work in construction and retail than in healthcare and education. And our median income is 27% higher than the national average. More of us have a need for assistance due to disability than the national average, and 1 in 4 of us have a long-term health condition. Mental health and arthritis are the most common long-term health conditions. So, hvala, thank you very much. As someone who loves Serbia and our country and the community, this has been a real honour to come here and present to you. So thank you very much for your attention.
I'd call upon Dalibor just to give us a quick update on Sales Tracker.
Thank you. Thank you, Miles, as well. Well, thank you, Oliver, for the invitation. And I'm not going to keep you too long. I think we got drinks and socializing and some food afterwards. So I'll be pretty quick. So second attendance of Australian Serbian Commerce Chamber of Commerce. We decided to sponsor it. So just a brief introduction of what Sales Tracker is. So how many of you here have a mortgage? Yeah, all right. So most of you here as well. So there's a 70% of chance that that was originated by a mortgage broker. And if you did that, there's about 30% of chance that it's gone to Sales Tracker. So that's what we do basically. So we are a software platform that does loan origination through mortgage broker channel, and we are going to the bank channel shortly as well. So we're 7 years young, and we are scale up. So we're not really a startup, so we're now getting into our expansion sort of mode, and fully self-funded. 47 employees in Serbia and Australia. We had an attempt to expand to Brazil, which is a very similar market for the IT sector outsourcing to Serbia, and that didn't really work really well for a number of reasons. So we deal with about 6,000 mortgage brokers and about 3,500 finance brokers in Australia and New Zealand. So we operate in New Zealand as well. It's a fairly small market, but we are there. And we are now the largest mortgage broker platform in Australia. So it's a very niche market. It's not very big, but in the last 7 years, we managed to build something in Serbia and here in Australia that basically has taken over the marketplace. We got a few other products. So I just mentioned one of them, WebLoan Q, online application tool for brokers, and a brand new product which is called Loan Tracker that we're launching later this year, which is the product for the banks. So similar sort of stuff, loan origination and CRM, where you can basically originate things. So that's sort of shortest possible presentation what I can say about Sales Tracker. Thank you.
And last but not least, Jaz Romic.
Hello everybody. Thank you to the keynote speakers. It was very informative, interesting. I'm looking forward to chatting with you after. And it's a pleasure to actually be sponsoring this event and speaking with you. Sippy and I go way back. So Quiddity, you can't tell by the name, but we're a professional outsourced finance department. We're working with businesses that are small and medium enterprises up to about 150 million turnover. We're basically giving them an alternative to hiring and managing internal accounting staff. Now, my sister and I started Quiddity 10 years ago in our parents' granny flat, and now we have 70 employees in Serbia, Australia, Vietnam, and the Philippines. Now, of those 70 employees, 50 are actually in Serbia. In the early years, we grew so quickly that we actually needed a scalable business model, and we needed something that was going to scale efficiently. So in 2015, we hired our first employee, and she basically built the office very quickly to 20 employees, and she's our first transfer into Australia. She's now our operations manager. Now, one of the things that I think has set us apart is that we've tapped into, as you mentioned, some really fantastic talent in Serbia. Highly educated people who really want to work and who want to make a difference, and that really resonated with us. But I think what's really made a difference for us is out of our 12 heads of department, 4 are actually in Serbia, and they all started at entry-level positions. Our HR department, our IT department, learning and development, and our quality and audit department is headed by employees in Serbia. One of the things that really surprised us was actually how easy it was to establish a presence in Serbia. We registered a DOO, also Quiddity DOO, a couple of years ago. And I can say that working with the Serbian government's legislation was really easy. There were a lot of incentives at the time that really helped us get established. And I'm happy to connect with anybody and share our experience if they are considering going down our route. what we're planning on doing is we're kind of hitting an exponential growth curve now, and our Serbian team has played a big part in this. We've just finished our 6th training program with 12 employees, and we expect that over the next couple of years that we'll have hundreds of employees in Serbia as well as in other countries across the world. Another reason that we've really grown and we've sort of established a bit of a niche model is that we really leverage agile technology, and we've developed a lot of finance department IP. It's IP that we can deliver to our clients while we're doing the work, that if they hired an equivalent employee, that type of knowledge and information wouldn't be readily available. On top of that, we have a 16-hour workday, which is fantastic, and the team that are working are not interrupted. And one of the things I think that my sister and I are the most proud of is that they're not a back office. Every single one of our team members is actually client-facing. They're dealing directly with the client. They're calling them, they're emailing them, and they're meeting all of their accounting needs. And the thing that is new for us, this is part of our long-term strategy. My sister and I, along with Mary Bielobrk, my first friend in Australia, have launched Calculated Solutions, which is a company that recruits for Australian businesses, but only accounting employees. And we're actually in talks with some Australian businesses who are interested in taking on talented Serbian employees into their organisations in fields like recruiting and IT. And so we're now looking at expanding into that service offering as well. That's about it for us. Thank you.
So thanks everybody. I think there was some really, really interesting case studies. Thank you both Dalibor and Jazz for for not only sponsoring tonight, but also just giving us some insight into your organisations. I think that's really, really impressive. Thanks again to our keynote speakers. Really appreciate everybody coming. Ambassador coming in from Canberra, as well as Nenad from Melbourne. I think it's been a really interesting night. And please do mingle, have some more food and drinks, and enjoy yourselves. We'll unofficially also have a bit of a drawing and give away some bottles of wine that Stefan's brought in. So please enjoy. Thank you.